You're sitting at table 12, Mum. The kids' table. We needed the head table for Marcus's investors. My daughter said it the way you'd mention the weather. No softness, no apology, just information being passed across a banquet hall while a string quartet tuned up somewhere behind us. I was holding my reading glasses in one hand and the seating chart in the other, and for a moment I genuinely thought I'd misread the placement. Table 12 was tucked behind a service column near the kitchen door. I could see it from where we stood, a round 8-top with a paper centerpiece, surrounded by my niece's twin boys, 2 teenage cousins from my son-in-law's side, and a high chair waiting for someone's toddler. I'm 68 years old. I was wearing the navy silk dress I'd bought specifically for this evening, the one I'd taken in twice at the seamstress on Cedar Avenue, because I wanted everything about tonight to look right. My hair had been done that afternoon at the same salon I've been going to for 31 years. My pearls were the ones my husband gave me on our 25th anniversary, the year before the cancer took him. "I'm sorry," I said. "Could you say that again?" My daughter, whose name is Bridget, who I carried for 9 months and rocked through colic and drove to ballet for 11 years and co-signed a mortgage for in 2019, looked at me with that polite impatience she'd been perfecting since her late 30s. "Mum, please. The investors are flying in from Charlotte. Marcus needs the head table to make a good impression. You'll be more comfortable back there anyway. It's quieter. The kitchen door was 30 feet from table 12. "Hello there, I'm Nora. I want you to sit with this scene the way I had to, because some humiliations don't arrive with shouting. They arrive in cream-colored envelopes and printed seating charts. They arrive at $300 a plate fundraisers. Your daughter asked you to help underwrite 6 months earlier, when she sat in your kitchen drinking your coffee and called you the most generous mother in the state of Ohio. This particular evening was the annual gala for the foundation Bridget and her husband had started 2 years before. A youth education non-profit, very photogenic, very board of directors. I had written a check for $42,000 to be the founding patron. My name was on the program. My name was in the bound report on every chair, and my seat was at table 12 behind a column near a high chair. I should explain Marcus quickly so you understand the room. Marcus is my son-in-law. He's 44, he sells commercial insurance, and he is the kind of man who orders the wine in restaurants without asking anyone what they'd like. He has a way of resting his hand on the small of your back when he's introducing you to someone, like he's gently steering a shopping cart. The first time I met him in a Cracker Barrel outside Columbus, he told me he'd done his research on my late husband's estate, and he wanted me to know he was a responsible steward of legacy. He used that exact phrase. I should have stood up and walked out right then. Instead, I let him pour me sweet tea. Standing in that ballroom with the chart still in my hand, I looked past Bridget toward the head table. It was a long rectangular setup near the small stage, draped in cream linen with hurricane lamps and centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus. Marcus was already there, shaking hands with a man in a charcoal suit. 2 empty seats sat to his right. I knew without asking that one was for Bridget and one had been intended, originally, for me. I'd seen the early draft of the seating chart in October. I had been on it. I'd shown my sister over Thanksgiving. "Bridget," I said quietly, "I was on the head table in October." She did that small smile she does, the one that's mostly mouth. "Mom, things change. Marcus only got confirmation about the Charlotte people 2 weeks ago. We had to reshuffle. It's just a chair. It's just a chair." Funny thing about that phrase. People who say it never seem willing to take the chair they're describing. I looked once more at table 12. Then I looked at Bridget in her champagne-coloured gown, the one I'd watched her try on at Saks in November, and quietly paid for at the register while she was in the dressing room. She'd said thank you with a kiss on my cheek, and never mentioned it again. I want to tell you that in that moment I felt rage. I didn't. I felt something colder and clearer than rage, The way the air feels at 4 in the morning when you've been awake for hours, and the house is still, and you finally understand a thing you've been avoiding for a long time. My daughter was not embarrassed to put me at table 12. She had decided I was a person who could be put there. "Of course," I said, "I understand." Her shoulders dropped half an inch in relief. She squeezed my forearm. "Thank you, Mum. You're the best. The Charlottes are major. This could be a real moment for the foundation." The Charlottes, as if they were a brand of soap. She walked off toward Marcus and the head table without looking back, and I stood for a long moment with the seating chart in my hand and watched her go. The string quartet had moved on to a Vivaldi piece I happened to know well, because I played it badly on the piano for 2 years in college. Funny what comes back to you in a moment like that. I did not go to table 12. I went to the lobby. The lobby of the Stevens Whitfield Hotel in downtown Cincinnati is one of those marble-floored, brass-railed places that smells faintly of fresh flowers and old money. There's a small reception desk near the coat check, and behind it a young woman in a black blazer was scrolling on a tablet. Her name tag said Pryor. I'd noticed her earlier when we were checking the room block. "Pryor," I said, and she looked up with that practiced smile. "I'm Nora Whitfield, the Whitfield Foundation Gala in the Magnolia Ballroom." "Yes, ma'am. Of course. How can I help you?" I took a breath. "I'm the patron of record on this event. The contract for the ballroom, the catering, the audio-visual package, and the room block for out-of-town guests is under my name and my credit card. Could you confirm that for me, please?" She tapped the tablet. Her eyes moved a little. "Yes, ma'am. The primary contract holder is Nora F. Whitfield. The deposit was placed in August, and the balance is on a visa ending in 44777. There's a final settlement scheduled for end of evening." "Thank you. And the Charlotte room block, 3 rooms, executive suites on the 18th floor." "Yes, ma'am. Those are also under your account." I nodded. I felt my pearls cool against my collarbone. "Priya, I need to make some changes. Could we step into the office for a moment?" She blinked once. Then she stepped out from behind the desk with the polite calm of someone who'd been trained for stranger requests than this, and led me through a door behind the reception alcove into a small back office with 2 desks and a window onto an alley. She gestured to a chair. I sat. I set my evening bag on my lap, and I did the only thing I'd been able to think clearly about since I'd seen table 12. "I'd like to settle the entire bill right now," I said. "All of it. Ballroom, catering, audiovisual, floral, the coat check tip pool, the room block, the breakfast service tomorrow. Everything that's currently on my card. Run it now and close the account." She paused. "Of course, ma'am. That's not a problem. May I ask, are you leaving the event early?" "I'm leaving the event period," I said, "and after you settle the account, I'd like to do something else. I'd like to take my name off the contract as the patron of record for any ongoing or future use of the Foundation's name in connection with the Stevens Whitfield. Going forward, any future events booked under the Foundation's name will need to provide their own card and their own primary contact. I am no longer their billing party." Priya looked at me for a long second, then she said, very softly, "Yes, ma'am. I'll need to call my supervisor to make that change formally, but I can absolutely do that tonight." "Please do." She stepped away to make the call, and I sat alone in that little office and looked at the framed photo on the wall above the second desk. It was a print of the Cincinnati skyline at dusk, the Roebling Bridge lit up in white. My husband proposed to me on a bench near that bridge in 1979. I'd worn a yellow sundress. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. When Priya came back, she had her supervisor with her, a woman named Denise with a grey bob and reading glasses on a chain. They sat across from me, and Denise spoke gently. "Mrs. Whitfield, before we move forward, I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you'd like." You'd like to settle the full bill tonight and remove yourself as the financial guarantor on the account moving forward. Yes. And the room block on 18, the 3 executive suites for the Charlotte party. Would you like those to remain reserved tonight? I thought about that. The honest answer was that I had paid for those rooms. They were mine for the evening in every legal sense. But what I said was, the guests have already checked in. 2 of the 3 have, yes. They picked up their key cards at 4 o'clock. Then those rooms will be honoured for tonight. But I'd like the second night of their stay, tomorrow, removed from my card and rebilled to whoever wishes to extend. The Charlotte party arrived expecting a 2-night stay. They can choose tomorrow whether to extend on their own terms. Denise nodded slowly. She didn't ask me why. I think she could see the why on my face. I can do that. And the breakfast meeting tomorrow morning. That's set up in the Riverview room for 15 people, 8 a.m. Cancel it. She wrote something down. And one more thing. My voice had not shaken once, which surprised me. There are 2 suites on the 12th floor that were booked for me and for my granddaughter. We were going to stay over and brunch in the morning. Cancel hers. I'll keep mine for tonight. Denise paused, pen hovering. Your granddaughter, I want to make sure I have the right room. Is that the booking under Caitlin Whitfield Rourke? That's her. Yes, Mom. I want to tell you something about my granddaughter Caitlin so you don't think badly of me for what I just did. Caitlin is 14. She's Bridget's daughter. She's the only person in my immediate family who calls me on Sunday afternoons just to talk, and the only one who remembered last March that it was the anniversary of my husband's death and sent me a card she'd drawn herself. She was supposed to come to the gala tonight, but she'd called me 3 days ago in tears because Bridget had told her she couldn't attend after all. There were too many adult conversations happening, and she'd be underfoot. Caitlin was at home in the suburbs with a babysitter, eating frozen pizza. I had not known this when I drove down here. Bridget hadn't mentioned it. I'd found out an hour earlier when Caitlin texted me from her bedroom. Have fun tonight, Grandma. Take pictures for me. I love you. So when Denise asked about the room booking, I said cancel it. But what I was really doing was making myself a small promise. That room was supposed to be a sleepover for me and my granddaughter. There was no reason to keep it now. Denise tapped her keyboard. The numbers added up on her screen. The total made my eyebrows lift slightly, but not as much as you'd think. I have managed my own finances for 14 years, since my husband's accountant retired, and I decided I didn't need a new one. I knew roughly what I had agreed to spend tonight. I just hadn't expected the bill to come due quite this way. The total comes to $91,412, Denise said. That's everything tonight, plus the breakfast cancellation fee, minus the second night room block credit and your granddaughter's room. I'm running it on the Visa ending in 477. Yes. The card reader chimed. The receipt printed. I signed it with my husband's old fountain pen, the one I always carry in my evening bag, because it reminds me he's still with me when I make decisions I would have made together with him. Then Priya walked me back into the lobby. Now, here is where things get more interesting and where I need you to picture the geography of the building. The Magnolia Ballroom sits off the main lobby, separated by a wide hallway with double oak doors. While I'd been in the back office, the cocktail hour had given way to seating. Through the cracked open ballroom doors, I could hear the muffled sound of Marcus at the microphone, doing his welcome remarks. He has a voice he uses for events. It's 2 registers, lower than his real one. I stood in the lobby with my evening bag and my receipt. My phone was in my hand. I had not yet decided what I wanted to do next, and I want to be honest with you about that. Some part of me wanted to walk back into that ballroom and find Bridget and say all of it out loud, to her face, in front of the Charlotte investors and the bound program books with my name on them. Some part of me wanted to say nothing at all, get in my car and drive home to Dayton and let her find out the way she'd let me find out about Table 12. What I did instead was call my granddaughter. She answered on the second ring. "Grandma, aren't you supposed to be at the dinner?" "Sweetheart," I said, "would you like to go for ice cream tomorrow? Just you and me. I'll pick you up around 11 and we'll do the whole day, whatever you want." There was a small pause. Then her voice, very small. "Really? But you have brunch with Mum's people." "I'm cancelling brunch with Mum's people." She laughed, that sudden surprised laugh kids do when they're not sure if something is allowed. "Okay, yes, I want to." "Good. I'll see you tomorrow, my love." "Grandma?" "Yes. Are you okay? You know what's strange? She was the only person in my family who'd asked me that question in a long, long time." "I am now," I said. "Get some sleep." I hung up, and then I stood in the lobby of the Stevens Whitfield Hotel and tried to decide whether to walk away quietly or whether to do one more thing. While I was deciding, the choice was made for me, because the ballroom doors swung open and a small woman in a black headset came hurrying out, scanning the lobby, and when she saw me, her face brightened with the relief of someone who'd been searching for 10 minutes. "Mrs. Munnizing, Whitfield. Oh, thank goodness. Bridget asked me to find you. She wants you for the patron acknowledgement. We're about to do the toast." I looked at her kindly. Her name tag said Megan, event coordinator. She was probably 26. "Megan, I'm afraid I won't be able to do the toast tonight. I'm not feeling well." Her face fell. "Oh no, should I get you a car? Should I tell Bridget? Please tell my daughter I had to leave. And Megan, there's something else I'd like you to give her." "Could you wait one moment?" I asked Priya for a piece of hotel stationery and an envelope, and at the lobby desk I wrote a short note. 3 sentences. I'm not going to pretend I drafted it for an hour. I wrote it the way you write a check, briskly, because the amount has already been decided. "Bridget, the bill for tonight has been settled in full, and my name has been removed from the Foundation's account at this hotel. Future events will need to be financed in your husband's name, not mine. I'll see Caitlin tomorrow at 11. Mum." I sealed the envelope. I handed it to Megan. I asked her to give it to Bridget privately, after the toast, not before. I did not want to ruin the photographs. The Charlotte people had flown in. Megan took the envelope with the focus of a person who knew something significant was happening and didn't fully understand what. I gave her a small smile and said thank you, and then I walked out the front doors of the Stevens Whitfield onto the sidewalk on 5th Street, where the valet was already pulling up cars in the December evening cold, and I stood there with my coat over my arm and waited for mine. "Tell me honestly, if your daughter had put you at table 12, would you have stayed and smiled through it, or would you have done what I did?" The valet brought my car around, a 6-year-old Buick that my husband would have laughed at me for keeping, and I tipped the boy $10 and got in. I sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I was not crying, I should mention that. I had not cried once. Some part of me wondered if I was going to crash later, the way grief sometimes ambushes you a week after the funeral. But not yet, not in the parking lot of the Stevens Whitfield. I drove 3 blocks before my phone started ringing. I want to be very honest about what happened next, because I think the next 90 minutes are the part of the story most people get wrong when they tell stories like this, the part where the wronged person gets the satisfying confrontation and the apology and the moment of vindication. That isn't what I got. What I got was something quieter, and in some ways harder. The first call was Bridget. I let it ring. I was driving on the highway by then, north on I-71, with the city falling away in my rearview mirror. The second call was Marcus. I let that one ring too. The third call was Bridget again, and this time she left a voicemail. I listened to it in my driveway when I got home. with my coat still on and the heat ticking in the radiator and the cat winding around my ankles. Her voice was tight. "Mom, I don't know what you've done, but the hotel says they can't process anything more on the Whitfield account. They're saying you closed it. We have a brunch tomorrow. We have rooms. The Charlotte's room is on the 18th floor, and they're saying tomorrow night isn't covered. What is going on? Please call me back." This is not the time for whatever this is. I sat down at my kitchen table and listened to it twice. Then I put the phone face down and made myself a cup of chamomile tea and ate 2 slices of the cinnamon toast my husband used to make on Sunday mornings, the way he made it, with butter melted into the bread before the cinnamon went on. Then I went to bed. She called 4 more times before midnight. I didn't answer. In the morning, I picked up Caitlin at 11, the way I promised. We went to a place called Aglamesis Brothers in Oakley, an old-fashioned ice cream parlor with marble countertops and metal ceiling fans. The kind of place I used to take her mother when she was a little girl. Caitlin got mint chocolate chip in a waffle cone. I got butter pecan in a cup. We sat by the window and watched people walk their dogs in the cold, and she told me about a girl at school who was being mean to her best friend, and about a poem she'd written for English class, and about how she didn't really want to be on the lacrosse team anymore, but didn't know how to tell her mother. "You can tell your mother," I said. "She'll understand." Caitlin gave me a long look, the kind 14-year-olds give you when they know something you're hoping they don't know. "Grandma, Mum doesn't really listen." I held her gaze. There was no point lying to her. "Then tell her anyway. And if she doesn't listen, you tell me. I'll listen." She nodded. Then she said, "Did something happen at the dinner?" I paused with my spoon halfway to my mouth. I am not someone who lies to children, and I'm especially not someone who lies to my granddaughter. But there are things you don't share with a 14-year-old about her mother. "Something happened, sweetheart. Your mum and I are going to need to have a conversation, but it has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with how much I love you. Okay? Okay." After ice cream, we went to the bookstore and I bought her 3 novels. We had lunch at a deli where the soup of the day was wedding soup, which she thought was hilarious because she'd never heard the name. I dropped her at home at 4. Bridget's car was in the driveway. I did not go in. I waved to my granddaughter from the curb, watched her go up the walk, and pulled away. Bridget called again at 7 that night. I picked up. "Mum." Her voice was different this time, lower, tired. "Can I come over?" "Yes." She arrived at 8:15 in jeans and a sweater, no makeup, her hair pulled back. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. The same one where she used to do her algebra homework, where her father used to read the Sunday paper, where I'd sat the night he died and looked out the window at the neighbor's porch light and tried to figure out how to be a person without him. For a long time she didn't speak. Then she said, "The Charlotte people left this afternoon. They were not happy. Marcus is. Marcus is very upset. I imagine he is. Mum, the bill at the hotel. The foundation doesn't have $90,000 in operating reserves. We were supposed to be reimbursed from the Gala proceeds over the next quarter. That's how we planned it." "I'm aware." "You're aware?" She looked up. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying. Bridget rarely cries. "You knew that was the plan, sweetheart. I wrote the plan. I structured it that way at your accountant's request. Then why?" I took a long sip of coffee. I had spent the day deciding how I was going to answer this question, because I knew it was coming. I considered being gentle, the way I'd been gentle with her for 42 years. I'd considered being angry. What I settled on was being honest, which was harder than either of those. "Bridget, last night he put me at table 12 so your husband could impress some men from Charlotte. You did it without warning me. You did it without asking me. And you did it knowing I had paid for the entire evening. You did it knowing my name was on the program as the founding patron of an organization you and Marcus run because I capitalized it for you. and then you told me it was just a chair. Mum, I'm not finished. She sat back. For 3 years now, I've been writing checks for things you and Marcus described to me as investments, opportunities, gestures, the condo in Florida, the Tesla, the startup capital for Marcus's brother's contracting business that I haven't seen a return on and don't expect to, the down payment on the house in Indian Hill, the foundation, your daughter's tuition at Country Day. Each individual item, I told myself it was fine. Family helps family. But last night you put me at the kids' table, and what I realized, sitting in my car on 5th Street, was that I had let you and Marcus build a life on my back, and I had let you both convince yourselves that I was the kind of woman who would be grateful to be allowed near it. She was crying now, quietly, not the crying of someone who has been wronged, the crying of someone who has just understood something. Mum, I'm so sorry. I know you are. It was Marcus's idea. The seating. He said the Charlottes wouldn't take us seriously if they saw a 68-year-old woman at the head table. He said it would look provincial. I had suspected this, but hearing her say it out loud was a different thing. And you agreed. I didn't push back. I should have. I knew it was wrong when I walked over to tell you, Mum. I knew it. He's been so stressed about the Charlotte deal, and I kept telling myself it was just for one night. It was not just for one night, sweetheart. It was the way the two of you have been talking about me for a long time when I'm not in the room. Last night was just the night I was in the room when it happened. She put her face in her hands. I want to tell you, I felt vindicated. I didn't. I felt the way you feel when you finally pull a splinter out of your finger that's been there for months. Not triumphant, just relieved that the work of pretending it wasn't there was over. We talked for another hour. I told her my financial support of the foundation was finished, and that any future event they hosted would need to be on their own credit. I told her I would continue to pay Caitlin's tuition through the end of high school, because Caitlin had not chosen any of this, and I would not punish a child for her parents. I told her the Florida condo would be put in my name only, and that Marcus's name was coming off the deed by the end of the month. I told her I loved her, and that I would always love her, and that this was not a punishment but an adjustment, because I had let her believe a wrong thing about who I was, and I needed to undo that. She nodded through all of it. When she stood to leave, she hugged me longer than she had in a decade. I don't know what I'm going to tell Marcus, she said at the door. Tell him whatever you'd like, sweetheart, but tell him from your own mouth. I'm not part of that conversation. She left. I watched her car back out of the driveway, the same driveway I'd watched her learn to ride a bicycle in 1985. Then I went inside, and I sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time since the seating chart, I cried. Not because of what had happened at the gala, because of what I had allowed for years before it. Here is the part of the story I want you to hear most clearly. I'm not telling you this so you'll think I'm clever. I am not clever. I am 68 years old, and I let my own daughter put me at a kid's table, because I had spent 4 decades teaching her, with every check and every accommodation, that I would accept whatever was handed to me. The check at the Stevens Whitfield wasn't the moment I stood up for myself. It was the moment I noticed how long I'd been sitting down. Caitlin texted me last week to tell me she'd quit lacrosse and her mother had said, okay, without making it a big deal. She also said she wants to come stay with me for the first week of summer. I told her, of course. I'm going to teach her to play that Vivaldi piece on the piano, the one I played badly in college. I expect she'll play it better than I ever did. The girls in her generation are going to play a lot of things better than mine did. People talk about respect like it's something you demand. In my experience, it's something you make space for, by finally refusing to make space for the other thing. What would you have done? Would you have walked into that ballroom and said it all out loud, or would you have done what I did and let the silence speak for you? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if these stories mean something to you, I'd love it if you stayed a while. There are more to tell. I want to sit with you for a few minutes before you go, because the part of this story I keep coming back to isn't the moment I signed that receipt at the Stevens Whitfield. It's the 40 years before it. Causes have a way of arriving at us long before we recognize them. When I co-signed Bridget's first mortgage in 2019, I told myself I was being a good mother. When I wrote the check for the foundation, I told myself I was investing in my daughter's purpose. When I paid for the gown at Saks without mentioning it, I told myself I was being kind. But kindness without honesty is just a slow trade. I was trading respect for peace, and the peace I bought was always temporary. The bill I paid at the gala that December night wasn't really for the catering in the ballroom. It was for every conversation I'd avoided, every line I'd let blur, every time I told myself it was just a chair, just a check, just a small thing. The hotel didn't charge me $91,000. My silence had been charging me for years. That's the part I want my granddaughter Caitlin to understand someday, because I see it forming in her already. The instinct girls are taught early to make themselves smaller so the room stays comfortable. I taught it to Bridget without meaning to, and Bridget was passing it down. The cycle doesn't break because someone shouts. It breaks because someone, finally, stops paying for it. I think a lot now about the difference between being kind and being needed. They are not the same thing, and I confused them for most of my adult life. Marcus saw me as needed. He counted on the woman who would always cover the gap. The day I closed that account, what I was really closing was a story about myself I'd been telling for decades. The story that said my worth was measured by how much friction I removed from other people's lives. Here's what I've learned, and I offer it to you the way one woman offers another a chair in her kitchen. Character is not built in the easy moments. It's built the night you sit in a hotel office and decide calmly that you will no longer be the lubricant for someone else's ambition. Wisdom is not knowing what to say. It's knowing when to say nothing and let your decisions speak. And courage, real courage, isn't loud. It's a 68-year-old woman in a navy silk dress, signing a receipt with her late husband's pen, walking out into the December cold, and calling her granddaughter to make a different kind of plan for the morning. If you take one thing from my story, take this. Generosity that requires you to disappear isn't generosity. It's a long, polite form of erasure. You can love your children and still refuse to be erased by them. In fact, I think that may be the most loving thing some of us are ever asked to do.